Welcome back to the Ego Actus reading series, Dramatic Voices. This is Laura, and I'm thrilled once again to be doing our third episode, Confirmation, which goes live Sunday, February 18th. This time, our playwright and director duo comes to Vincent and Robert. If you both want to say a quick hello.
How you
Quick
doing?
hello.
Yes.
The biggest hellos for the biggest personalities. I'm thrilled to have you both here. And I say we just dive right on in, right? How are we feeling about that?
Go right ahead.
Perfect. Why don't we start with our playwright, Vincent? My first question for you is really what brought you to the world of theater? And specifically in your case, what brought you to playwriting?
It's a great question. Initially, I came to the creative arts like most of us. I was an exhibitionist and youngest child, and I had this need to be always seen and heard. And what initially is I went to my college, and I thought they had a vibrant film program. But what I found out after I arrived, they didn't have it anymore. It was scaled back to just a few classes. So I went into communications, and then I locked into an on-campus theater group that really touched on a lot of the muscles that I had been working on in various high school and community productions, which were mostly acting. And I was mostly acting for a while until I was told by some friends, you keep having opinions about what other people have to do. Why don't you direct? And then I started directing for over a decade or more. But I discovered that there were things I needed to say, and that's what brought me to playwriting. So it was kind of this, and I think you can ask Robert the same question. When you tend to begin with one thing, either performance, directing, and you find your path um, within that. And I seem to have settled into my path of playwriting, because I control freak. I want to control the entire world and how it's seen. And luckily, and in my dotage, I've come to the conclusion that collaboration allows me to see my play in a live way, meaning that once you create something, once you write something, it's fixed in a certain way. And even if you're a competent director, it continues to be very fixed in how you've overall seen it. But when you work with somebody, especially somebody as creative and knowledgeable as Robert, you begin to see opportunities for the world to live on its own. And in theater, a play lives because of collaboration. Um, and that's where I'm at right now with the playwriting.
Oh, I love it. I think you're definitely right. In the past, with the previous episodes in this podcast, and then the podcast from, I believe, 2020, Survival is Insufficient, a lot of playwrights had a similar answer to yours, right? You start off with one thing, you suddenly find your path, and there it goes. You keep going. I love the point that you make about collaboration, though, right? The playwright writes the story, the director tells it, the actors act it out, but you're the one who starts off with the idea and then saying, how can we get it out for folks to really see it? I love the answer, Vincent.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Robert, I have the same question for you, right? What brought you into the theater? But rather from the playwriting side, I'm wondering what your journey was when it came to directing, specifically for theater, but your whole journey.
Well, I, where I grew up in Coney Island, I was always like the leader of my gang, not a gang, but like a sports team with all the
Mhm.
teams in my building. And I was like the captain of all the teams. And I was about like 5, 6, 7 years old. Like I had some sort of ability to unite several people and unify them to a singular goal, whether it was sports or whatever. Then around 13, my life's vocation, I wanted to be a sports writer. So I would do that a little bit. And then when I was about 16, 17, I got bit by the bug in my last year in high school. And and I've been bit since, obviously. But my first love in the theater, which is most people, would be acting. I was positively atrocious in anything I touched on the stage. However, um, when I got to college, I had like a knack or an interest in directing, seemed to have some success with it. And the original qualities that I had of like unifying 20 people like fingers on a fist kind of thing
Mm.
Hmm.
seemed to translate to directing, and I had a knack for it. And from that, when I was 22, I quit my last semester of college to form a theater company, with me
Oh.
serving as artistic director and
Wow.
for some of the shows. So any reputation I had prior to that, and I'm saying this as modestly as I can, was based on my directing skill, or being able to
Mm.
provide like insights into actor or actresses, or into the text of a play, and to also like unify all the various arts that are in the theater, like Vincent was alluding to about the collaborative art. There's no greater collaborative art than theater. And
No.
Mm.
my prime function is to unify all the collaborative arts and make them into one big fat stew, with me being like the head chef, and make sure everybody's art shines and make sure everybody gets a say. And at the end of the day, I'm the chief bottle washer, and we throw it up and hopefully that it sticks.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but since 81 or 82, I think I've directed over 100 plays, and enjoy it because a couple of reasons. One, there's no when theater is cooking, when it's really sizzling, there is no art like it. That's one. Two, it's given that we live in 2024, it seems to be the last art that is live, that no
Mm.
technology can like get in the way of, because there's nothing like a live performance.
Yep.
And three, theater, when it's really virtuous and doing the right thing, it really tries in its own small, little, simple way to make the world a better place. I really believe that with the whole of my heart, and that's why I'm proud to be in the theater. And any reputation that I've garnished for that is toward that end. I certainly, and I can speak for Vincent and any number of playwrights and directors, we don't make a living at this, that's for sure. But we do it.
Not
Uh,
yet. Not yet.
well, not yet. Yes, not yet. That's
I still
correct.
hold out against hope.
Yeah, we're still holding right. We're still holding out hope for sure. That you're right. From our mouth to God's ears, absolutely for sure. Um, but that's really the driving force, not monetarily anyway, to like touch other people. We love the two old ladies on the Q train going back to Brooklyn and debating the virtues of a play or a production, and that to me and Vincent and other people is what really is it's about. So that's why we do what we do.
For it.
In theater, Robert speaks to a lot of things, and Robert, I am so jealous that you were in a position to go out and create, because in many families, especially first generation immigrant families like myself, we had to be stealthy artists because
Right.
it was an embarrassment to say, "Oh, my son's an art, a writer or an actor." But you came up with a term which we've heard of: theater of the absurd and theater of cruelty. But
Mm.
Robert, you have the theater of virtue. And you said that, and I think that's a lovely way of encapsulating the idea of a positive family kind of collaboration, theater of virtue.
Well,
And
thank you. And I think I think I just coined the phrase. I, and I'm putting my copyright on it right now.
yeah,
But
yeah,
I mean, yeah, there are theaters of what you said, the theater of menace and theater of the absurd,
cruelty
but
and
cruelty for sure with Artaud for sure, and but theater of virtue, like it's like we're firemen, like
yeah,
many professions. They're always like a double-edged sword, like a police officer or a lawyer. There's always the underbelly of corruption. But a fireman, all they want to do is put out fires. That's all they want to do, and that's all they benefit from. There's no corruption in putting out a fire. And at least like when I carry on through my days, at least any day that I touch theater, I know in some fashion I'm touching a new actor, actress who just got bit by the bug, or a
mhm.
question about a script and stuff like that. And I'm happy to give anybody who wants it everything I have in my tank. It's for the next generation and for me as well, because it's an unalloyed good. That's what I really believe.
Mm. Well said.
Thank you.
Folks, you heard it here. Theater of Virtue. And it's going under copyright, so no one touch that one. It's Robert.
Copyright pending. Oh my goodness.
I love it though, Robert. And Vincent, thank you for your additional thoughts. One of my favorite things when it comes to talking to folks in the entertainment industry, but specifically within theater, is the passion that goes behind what you're saying. It's not just, and you said it, Robert, right? In 2024, theater really does feel like one of the last types of art that you can see live, truly. And don't get me wrong, I love the future. I love seeing where the future goes. Sometimes these things with AI are incredible, and you hope
Right.
that it's going to help folks in the long run. But God, I hope and I pray that theater remains as it is and as it should, and that folks continue to adapt to it and grow with it, but in the most honest sense, in the way that you and Vincent are describing. I love the answer. I love seeing the journey. I love hearing the passion, for sure.
Well, thank you. And to extrapolate, not extrapolate, but like to expand on that, the theater has been alive for at least 2,500 documented years, maybe even
Yeah.
longer. Right now, it's kind of on life support because, like
Hmm.
Vincent alluded to a little bit, and you have as well, playwriting seems to be, in my view, a dying art and an art that is hard to achieve for
Mm.
various reasons. Back in the day, in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, playwrights made their bones in New York or Boston or Philadelphia theater, and then eventually, quote unquote, sold out to go write screenplays in Hollywood. And I would have no trouble of citing examples. But now it seems, if my life depended on it, I could not name you a playwright that consistently produces a play like every year, every 18 months,
Hmm.
every 2 years. Where back in the day when I went to school and studied what was before me, if I were to cite you Mamet or Odets or Arthur Miller or Inge or like 100 people, they produced a prolific body of work, and eventually to pay the bills, they would go to Hollywood to do this, that, and the other. But
Yep.
they made their bones on the New York stage or the Philadelphia stage or the Boston stage. And because of that, there were less electronic opportunities as opposed to now, where the easy
Yeah.
thing to do, oh, listen, it's 11 degrees outside. I'd rather just stream Hulu or watch Netflix than brave the cold and worry if there's going to be heat in the theater. Like, and these are the obstacles that Vincent and I and every theatrician faces, because we're constantly swimming against the current, because there's so many alternatives for entertainment these days that did not exist in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And it's an uphill battle. And yet here we still are swimming
Yeah.
against the current and just doing what we can because we love this particular art.
I think we're in a transition period that's
Yes.
not
Exactly.
unlike what happened in the 60s. The theater was on life support in the 60s with the advent of television. And people thought that that was going to be the death of theater. And what
Right.
happened is they transitioned to telling more immediate, more subversive, more iconic, not iconic, but necessarily um, selective stories that they would never see on television. And I think that while the pandemic has had an incredible disastrous effect, I mean, we've had three
Yeah.
events in New York that have really damaged theater in economically, meaning that it's taken away our spaces and have rendered our ability to find a space to present very difficult. Is it began with 9/11 and then the recession of 2008
Mhm.
and then the pandemic. And
Yep.
in those three, in that 20-year period, and we discussed before Robert came on, you're being in the with us for 20 years in this country, that
Oh, yes.
yeah, that in your lifetime, what you've seen is this transition from a healthy, and Robert can back me up on this, an incredibly healthy independent theater, or what they used to call off Broadway, where you had
Hmm.
the no joke, any day of the week, dozens of productions somewhere in the five boroughs going on at a
Absolutely.
minimum. Now there are going to be days that you don't, and I think we're in a transition period where theater is going to become is going to swing the other way and become more selective and more private. And we might, I mean, I've noticed, I've been going to a lot of plays lately where people are doing it in their homes.
Yeah.
You're part of a small group of 20, 25 people jammed into a space to see something extraordinarily private. Now, sadly, that sounds like a boutique kind of approach, and that might limit some people. But I remember back in the 90s, going in Harlem and going to these apartments where you would just see a jazz performance and you pay $20 and there'd be all this food that would be out there and you would just listen to jazz and there'd be like 50, 60 people walking in and out all night long. And I think we're moving in a direction where the theater is going to find a new way of existing because the collaboration, people need to collaborate, need to be in the same room with
Hmm.
each other. And that's going to win out. I find theater is like water. Water will always find a way. So
Well said.
that's my
What
that's
good
my 2 cents.
insights.
Thank
No,
you.
no, no. Those are fantastic insights to bring up. And, I think there's a separate conversation that
Hmm.
needs to be had about accessibility within the theater, right? You talk about the
Yeah.
three major economical impacts that theater has had, specifically in New York City, and the idea or the transition that it's becoming a bit more intimate. Folks are doing it in the apartment. Look, I can absolutely see it happen. I have seen it happen. For God's sake, if you go on YouTube, and folks who are listening, I suggest you do the same. There's a production of Philip Glass's Einstein on the Beach,
Hmm.
all done by college students in their apartment, and it's marvelous. And that could be the direction that theater could be going.
Wow,
But we
that
don't know
would be
yet.
something to see.
I know,
Uh,
right?
well, having seen the original, I just like that's like wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's impactful, and I think that's what we don't want to lose from theater. And that's why, right, the Ego Actus dramatic reading series is so important, right? We have playwrights, we have directors who are so fully in love with the theater that, say what you will, if theater is on life support, then you folks are the ones clawing at it and getting yourselves out of that pit after what we've had in 2020 with the lockdown and the closing of so many shows and potential great shows. So, hearing this insight from both of you, it gives me immense hope, and I hope it gives our listeners hope of what theater currently still is and what theater very well could become, because it's going to become something, but we're not going to lose it for sure. That's for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, well, being somebody who came from a generation who had no fear of giving mouth to mouth, I gladly will give it resuscitate theater anywhere I can.
We'll continue to give it that CPR it needs. Absolutely. Folks, we've gone into such conversations, and that was just our first question. I love it though. I love hearing it, but I do want to bring it back a little bit towards the specifics of this show in particular. And Vincent, I think I'll start with you, but both of you feel free to turn it into that conversation. When it comes to this show specifically, right? What was the process of writing it as a play, its major inspirations? And Robert, for you, what was it like taking Vincent's work and directing it and getting that cast together and knowing that both of you are going to make this show happen for Sunday?
Well, uh, I, mu- I would like to say that I think, like checking my long, illustrious career, I don't think I ever was assigned to direct a play that I hadn't read prior.
Mm,
And usually I read the play before and I deal with the playwrights or a dead playwright or whatever. And this one, since I'm all open for a new adventure, I said, what the hell? I'm in for a penny and for a pound. And when I read the play, since I go to the theater all the time, I'm either in it or going to it, or I'm a theater
good.
critic as well for an online magazine. So I'm constantly going to the theater and I have my hand pretty much on the pulse of what is out there, what works, what is garbage, and what's in between. And immediately I could tell a few things that sang the praises of my esteemed colleague here. One, he knows how to write a play. Two, more importantly, or just as important, in my view, the play covers ground where there are no footprints in the snow. And that to me is very important. I am tired, sick and tired of playwrights or anybody, it doesn't even have to be a playwright, but playwrights specifically writing the same old play with a slight different permutation. This play covers other issues that are not only, in my view, uh, excuse me, go where there is no footprints in the snow, but also, since the play takes place in 1989, it shows two things. One, how far we have come as a civilized people, and the flip side of the coin would be how far we have yet to go in order to get to a more exalted state or a more raising of the consciousness kind of thing. Because when you hear some of the things in the play that are occurring, and it's only 1989, like not only was I around, but my son was around. And then you hear some of the things that are going on, and you say, oh my God, how could this still be?
Yeah.
And yet it is still be. Discrimination, all sorts of hatred and bigotry are still existent in 2024, although clearly less than it was when I was a man of my 30s in 1989, or even when I was a kid and back in the 70s. Yeah, but yet there's still a ways to go. Back to Vincent's ability as a playwright, I love swift, quick dialogue, like Mamet, like Feydeau, like even Odette's, or somebody that where the dialogue is going at a rapid fire pace. Because I am of the belief theater audiences are smarter than film audiences, and they will grasp it. They want that tennis, that ping pong tennis match going back and forth between irresistible force meeting a movable object, because that's what they pay for. And they want that parlor game, and they want that those calisthenics for their mind. And that's what the theater brings that films necessarily don't. Not all films, I'm making a generality, of course, but like most films, they're filled with violence, gratuitous sex, cartoons, sequels, foolishness, and everything is handed onto the consumer's lap. In theater, and in this play in particular, yes, there's a lot of dialogue, and yes, there's a lot occurring. There's a lot of moving parts, but there are a lot of suggestive things, a lot of things that touch on the imagination. And I might say Vincent, in the same breath, is very funny and makes very quick-witted things, something in the line of, let's say, Noel Coward, or even the one who wrote the Points of Being Earnest, Oscar Wilde.
Yeah.
And the ability to make people laugh is a wonderful trait that not many people have. And clearly, in my view, this play is extremely well written and as funny as all hell in spots. And that's what it really is about.
Well, thank you, Robert. I appreciate that very much.
My pleasure to say it.
The comparisons. Going back to your question, this play was one of the first. You write, as Robert and I have discussed in our collaboration, you write what you know, what you experience. And I have been being a last of 8 children, and a big gap between myself and I had a sister who was 23 years older than me, a brother who was 21 years older than me, and being the only one born in the United States, I was from the very beginning an outsider, even in the most comfortable of situations. And as I got older and I went to college, and I created, Amistad Maupin from Tales of the City had a great phrase. There is your biological family and there's your logical family. And I found my logical family in college, and in finding them, I had a lot of friends who were gay. And there was this playful period where people said, well, why are you so comfortable with these people? Because that's how people talked about gay people, these people. Even the most liberal of us were not comfortable embracing people as being equal in a certain way. So that became like an obsession for me in terms of understanding my own relationship. So this play began as was one of the first plays I wrote, actually. It was like the third play, and it was called Nice Boys, and it had a much more darker tinge to it because I saw a predatory nature in it, and it was inspired by stories that my friends had told me. And then as time went on, it began to evolve. And when I lost dozens of people, some close friends, some people I knew in the business, between 1987 to
Yeah.
1996, 97.
You
A
know,
whole we lost
Yeah.
2 generations of artists and wonderful people. I put it aside and came back to it, and I put up the first version of it in the dearly departed Fringe Festival, which is making a comeback this year underneath the Frigid Festival banner. Um, Back in 2009, Laura, when you were just in elementary school, and so I uh, I I found a voice, but it wasn't quite there yet. I was still working through things, and so what I was trying to come to is this idea of how we can surrender the most important thing we have, which is our own judgment, our own sense of righteousness, our own sense of infallibility, our own sense of that we're good people. Sometimes we tie this idea of being a good person to a very strict moral code or a perception that really has no bearing on being good in the sense of being an accepting, embracing person. And that's what this play has been for me. And when Robert first took it on, he had a couple of very clear issues with the piece that centered around this idea of how much of the main character named Joe was I going to explore to the detriment of the rest of the
Mhm.
piece? Meaning, was I going to keep lacerating at this character? And we came to a conclusion that there was enough in the piece that we got who Joe was and what his conflict and what his issues were. And that yielded a much tighter, I think, version of the play. So I hope that answered kind of what you were saying in a
It
very
answered
long-winded.
and then some. Both you and Robert answered the question brilliantly, and I like how the both of you turn it into a conversation where you can talk about your experiences. And it's incredible that you mention it because, yes, I was in elementary school. I was so young at the time. And it kind of gives you that perspective of the generations that came before you, right? In general, but you think about it in the sense of theater and those theater makers, those artists, and those we've lost along the way,
Oh,
which makes you
so
really think
many.
about it. Yeah. I I love that this is how you're telling the story and how you and Robert collaborate on it. Um, and truth be told, I think the both of you, in the span of the two questions I have asked, have already answered the third. But I have one more question for you both. And
Sure.
please, I would adore it for it to be a conversation because it's one of those questions I love to ask any theater maker. But how do you hope the audience responds when they go to see the show on Sunday? What do you hope they get from this piece?
Um,
go ahead, Vince.
want me to go, Rob?
Yes,
Uh,
please.
since the play, in my mind, is somewhat of a parable, I'm hoping that the universality of the piece, that it's, as Robert said earlier, as um appropriate and as germane to what we're going through today as it was where I said it and when I first produced it. I mean, in every single instance, there was uh, when I first did it in 2009, it was in the shadow of the failed attempts at trying to get gay marriage passed, among other things. And so there's a lot of in the piece that I hope people identify with and say that at some point they may know intellectually that it's set in 1989, but the vitality and the urgency of the message and what I'm trying to say would be clear. And I might say this is one of those few plays in recent memory where a priest appears on stage and he's actually a good person. So
Mm,
it's one of those things where I feel like I had an opportunity to demonstrate that because I am a practicing Catholic. So it was important for me to say
mhm.
it's not always, plays like the Cardinal Detoxes or some other or Doubt.
Or Doubt, which is running now, right? It's
Yeah,
out,
well, it's opening soon.
currently
They
running.
just Tyne Daly dropped out and they replaced her with Amy Ryan, which is an
Oof,
interesting change of cast.
interesting.
They, given the fact that when you think of Tyne Daly, you don't think then in the next thought Amy Ryan, but then when you put
Yes, you
that
usually don't.
Right.
when you put that little surplus on their heads, that little nun surplus on their heads. Uh, everybody gets lumped together. So Robert,
Yeah, what I would like the audience to take away with,
Mm.
obviously, the low-lying fruit would be to laugh, to be entertained, to be educated, to be enlightened, to realize that that bad things happen to good people, but also in the larger sense, what's important to me, um, and this goes to anything I touch in the theater, that within 5 minutes of curtain, 7 minutes of curtain, I want the audience to say to themselves, I am in the hands of masters who take their art very seriously.
Mm.
And I'm not talking about myself. I'm removing myself from the equation. I'm talking about the playwright, and I'm talking about my performers tonight and the reader of the stage direction. So many times when I go to the theater, I am invariably disappointed or outraged or walk out. There's no limit up to describing negative reactions to poor theater. However, I find it I'm like a John the Baptist kind of thing, where I'm going to show whoever comes to the show tonight or any other time
Mm.
that that theater, when firing on all cylinders, is a wonderful art that can change the world, and that when you see not the combination of the skill of the writing buttressed against with the performing and the inner life that my actors and actresses will bring to the stage on Sunday, then yes, there's hope for the theater, and yes, what a brilliant play, and yes, what a brilliant stage reading production of a brilliant play, and yes, I will come back Sunday because there may be more of this. I
Mm.
like this instead of, oh my goodness, like Laura, I would have no trouble citing how many times I've gone to a theater as a critic or as just an audience member or involved in it, and within 10 seconds, I know I'm staring at 10 miles of bad road. I know that I am, and especially if there's no intermission, I can't get out of there.
There's
But
no
here,
escape.
what was that?
You don't escape. You stay right there.
You can't escape, and you're sitting there, and because New York audiences, they think they're so enlightened, and they're like chuckling at silliness, and here I am like seething that you have no idea what is being presented to you. This bad product is passing as art, and you don't know the difference between art and a billy goat, and it's very frustrating to me. Here, I'm happy to say, if I'm able to get my performers to shine and turn their juices on, etc. What I teach playwriting also. So what I teach my students is, if you write well enough, the lines will do the work for you. And
Mhm.
Mm.
clearly, if you see the play on Sunday, or the film version of it, From Our Mouth to God's Ears, you will see that my colleague has a wonderful ear for dialogue that will keep audiences enraptured in their chair, because not only is it insightful, but it is funny, and people love to laugh, especially in these horrible times that we live in, for so many different reasons. And it's nice to make people laugh and think and feel. And that's what I hope to achieve on Sunday.
That's a
Gentlemen, I
lot.
gotta say, this has been one of the most fun and most passionate episodes I have ever recorded. Not just for this series, but in general. It's always great to see how passionate folks get about the projects that they do, and it only makes me that more excited for you, for your cast, for this play when it goes live on Sunday. It
Thank
was
you.
such a
Thank you.
pleasure, gentlemen. It was so good to catch up, learn more about your journeys, your love of theater, the play itself. And folks, once more, you've heard it here. This is the Ego Actus reading series, Dramatic Voices. Confirmation is live Sunday, February 18th. You can find more information on egoactus.com. That's EGOACTUS.com. And a reminder, tickets are free. Donations are always appreciated, but this is the theater. We're going to share as much theater as we can. Come and join us. Vincent and Robert, thank you so, so much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Laura. Thank
Laura.
you for having us.
Thank you.